Bizarre.
For 3 months, he had heard nothing but the soft hum of air recyclers, the distant whir of coolant pumps, and the occasional creak of metal shifting in the cold. Silence had become his companion until the distress call came, a blinking red light on the comms console, an incoming request to dock. Mercer straightened in his chair. No one was scheduled to arrive. He reached for the terminal and activated the comms channel.
Kessler 6 responding. Identify yourself.
Static. He checked the transponder signal. There wasn't one. No ship registration, no affiliation. Just a single request that read, "Docking clearance required. Immediate." Mercer hesitated. Unidentified vessels weren't uncommon in deep space. Smugglers, black market traders, rogue research teams. But they always broadcasted something. This was different. The external cameras showed a dark silhouette approaching from the void. He zoomed in, expecting to see the standard blocky hull of a cargo ship or the sleek lines of a research vessel. But the thing drifting toward him was wrong. It was spindly, asymmetrical, like something grown rather than built. Its surface was dark, uneven, a patchwork of organic ridges and metallic spires. No visible thrusters, no lights, no insignia. And yet, it was coming. A shiver crawled down Mercer's spine. He reached for the docking override, ready to deny access, but his console flickered. Docking sequence engaged.
What the hell?
He softly muttered. He hadn't approved the request. A low, grinding sound resonated through the hull. The ship was attaching itself to Kessler 6. The external cameras showed something extending from the vessel, thin, claw-like appendages gripping the station's docking ring, not connecting via an airlock, but anchoring itself, like a parasite latching onto a hose. Mercer grabbed a plasma cutter from the emergency toolkit. His heart pounded as he floated toward the airlock. He checked the pressure gauge. Still sealed. No sign of forced entry. Maybe, just maybe, it hadn't breached. Then, the station lurched. Not just a vibration from the connection, but a movement. A sharp, unnatural jolt. Mercer braced against the bulkhead. His stomach twisted with the unmistakable sensation of acceleration. The station was moving. That shouldn't be possible. Kessler 6 had no propulsion system. It was a research outpost, built to drift in a stable orbit. It couldn't just start moving, but the external cameras confirmed it. The dark vessel was pulling the station with it, dragging it into deep space. The blue orb of Neptune, once visible from the observation deck, was shrinking. Mercer's breath quickened. He rushed back to the command terminal.
Error. Manual override disabled.
He pulled up the station's power systems. If he could sever the docking ring's energy flow, maybe he could force a separation. But the screen showed something worse. The power grid was being rewritten. Sections of the station were going dark, one by one. The oxygen scrubbers flickered. The heating systems powered down. Artificial gravity began to fail, leaving objects drifting in eerie, weightless suspension. Something was infecting the station. Mercer clenched his jaw and launched into an emergency protocol. If he couldn't sever the connection, he could at least send a distress signal.
Auto beacon deployment engaged.
A flicker of hope. At least someone would see it. Someone would come looking. But then,
Auto beacon signal jammed.
his pulse hammered. He looked up at the ceiling. at the metal walls around him, realizing for the first time that he might not be able to stop this, that he might not be able to escape. A deep, low hum reverberated through the station. It wasn't mechanical. It sounded almost organic, like a slow exhale from something impossibly large. He pushed himself toward the window, staring at the dark craft. It was changing. Where there had once been spires and ridges, the structure was shifting, melting into new forms. Thin tendrils extended from its hull, slithering like roots growing through cracks in concrete. And then, a sound. Not static, not an alert. A voice, not from the speakers, not through the comms. It was inside his mind, a whisper, hollow and ancient, curling like cold fingers around his thoughts.
You were never alone.
Mercer slammed his hands over his ears.
No! No! No!
The station lurched again, its speed increasing. The darkness outside deepened, stars blurring into streaks. The pull was growing stronger, but as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The station shuddered violently, as if being dropped from an immense height. Mercer was thrown into the wall, his breath knocked from his lungs. Silence followed. He opened his eyes, gasping, weightless in the dark. The external cameras showed something new, or rather, the absence of something. The station was no longer near Neptune, no longer near anything. There were no stars, no planets, no light, just an endless black void. Mercer's breath came in shallow gasps. He checked the star maps. Nothing. No recognizable constellations, no nearby celestial bodies. The station had been taken somewhere else, somewhere outside known space. His hands trembled as he reached for the emergency broadcast system, trying again, anything to call for help. As he gazed at the screen, he saw the final, horrifying message blinking on his console. External environment, unknown. Navigation systems, offline. Transponder signal, null. Crew count, 2. Mercer's blood ran cold. His hands hovered over the console, unable to move. There was no one else on the station, and yet the system recognized another presence. A long, slow breath echoed behind him. Not through the comms, not through the vents. Inside the room, he turned, and the lights went out. Mercer woke face down on the cold floor. His head throbbed. His limbs felt heavy, unresponsive, like he had been drugged. He blinked rapidly, trying to clear the haze from his vision. The sterile white walls of the station's corridor came into focus. He pushed himself up, his hands trembling against the smooth surface. The lights overhead flickered softly. The air was still, and the gentle hum of the station's life support systems thrummed beneath his feet. Had it been a dream? His mind felt scrambled, his memories fractured. He tried to recall exactly what had happened before he lost consciousness, but the details slipped through his thoughts like grains of sand. A chill ran down his spine. Suddenly, a door at the far end of the corridor slid open. Mercer turned, and his breath caught in his throat. A figure stepped inside. A man, a shrewd copy of Mercer. His height, his build, dressed in the same standard issue station uniform. For a split second, Mercer thought it was his own reflection in the polished metal of the door. But the face was wrong, distorted. The eyes weren't set quite right, the cheekbones too sharp. The mouth moved, too slowly, like it was struggling to remember how lips were supposed to form expressions. And even as Mercer stared, the features were changing, refining, becoming more like him. Mercer's chest tightened with a deep, primal fear. His mouth went dry. He took a slow step backward. The copy took a slow step forward. A smile pulled at its lips, smooth and practiced, almost perfect, but not quite. Mercer felt the air leave his lungs. The memory of the docking bay flooded back in an instant. The dark, unnatural craft, the power failure, the unbearable feeling that something had entered the station. It hadn't been a dream. He wasn't alone. And this thing was him. Mercer's pulse pounded in his ears. His mind screamed at him to run. A soft hiss poured out behind him. A door sliding open. Mercer turned and froze. The crew of Kessler 6 walked in. Every single one of them. Their uniforms were crisp, their faces identical to how he remembered them from their time together in the astronaut cadet program. Every scar, every wrinkle, every tiny detail perfect. But Mercer knew instantly. These weren't the people that vanished just a few months ago. When they spoke, their voices were wrong, flat, hollow.
We are not them,
one of the replicas said, as if answering his thoughts. Mercer felt his blood run cold. His throat went dry.
What are you?
His voice softly trembling with fear.
We are your replacement,
said the copy in a monotone, almost robotic voice.
My replacement?
Mercer said, his jaw clenched. His copy finally spoke.
Humanity's replacement.
Mercer's pulse pounded. His legs went numb, sending him staggering toward his copy. Mercer collapsed into his replica's open arms. His copy stroked his head, as if calming a newborn baby.
We have learned,
the copy said.
We have studied. We have become.
The blood flowed back to Mercer's legs, and he stood upright. His double freed Mercer from his grasp and turned toward the room's control panel, situated directly behind him. His fingers moved effortlessly, as if he had been trained to use the station's interface by NASA itself. The craft jolted violently, and the stars reappeared in the main bay windows. Mercer realized that he had been taken to another dimension, presumably to collect the other beings, the copies of the missing crew. But why had they returned? What was their scheme? A soft chime rang through the room. From the speakers, a calm, automated voice announced,
Emergency distress beacon activated. Rescue ship en route.
Mercer's blood turned to ice.
No!
He rasped loudly. The double turned back to face him. The smile was perfect now, indistinguishable from his own. A hand clamped over Mercer's mouth, muffling his scream. They carried him, moving through the halls of the station effortlessly, as if they had always belonged there. They took him to the docking bay, to the strange spacecraft that they had arrived in. They placed him inside, strapped him to a seat, and sealed the hatch. Mercer thrashed. He kicked. He fought. He screamed. But no sound escaped beyond the walls of the ship. A small display flickered in front of him, powering on. On the screen was a view from inside the bay of his space station. The copies walked into frame, turning toward the camera. His own double lifted a hand, a silent farewell. The craft lurched, breaking away from the docking clamps. Mercer was ejected into space. He watched through a small glass portal, helpless, as his space station grew smaller. The Kessler 6 station, with his stolen crew, drifted further away. From the edge of the window, he saw something enter his view. The rescue craft. It was sleek, shining, human-built, with the unmistakable NASA logo and American flag emblazoned on the outside surface. It docked with the space station. Mercer's gaze turned back toward the display screen. The copies stepped forward to greet the rescuers as they walked into the station's bay, smiling, welcoming them inside. Perfect, indistinguishable replicas of Mercer and the former crew of Kessler 6. Mercer opened his mouth to scream, but the void swallowed the sound. No one was coming for him. No one even knew he was gone.